Program of Oral History is on the air. This is Ray Mofield speaking, and today we're visiting in Livingston County. Although the person who will be interviewed on the program, Mr. Otho Holland, is actually from Marshall County, and we always start off by asking how old the person is.
I was born January the 19th, 1902, in Marshall County, near Birmingham.
Oh, another Birmingham person. Hasn't been too long since we interviewed Mark Clayton, and we learned several things about Birmingham, but I think you're a little older than he.
Well, that's right. I'd moved away from there to the Gilbertsville neighborhood before Dr. Clayton moved to Birmingham.
Well, to establish our genealogy for the benefit of those who are interested, and there are literally thousands of people who are interested, could you tell us your father and mother?
Oh, yes, and a lot farther back than that.
Great, as far back as you can go.
Well, anyway, shall I start with the earliest one I can remember?
All right, that's fine.
Well, my great-great-grandfather, John Stone, came here from North Carolina by way of Tennessee. His wife rode a horse, and he led a pack horse, and he had a few slaves, and they walked. He and the slaves did. And he settled on a farm about 4 miles from Birmingham and about 2 miles west of where Mount Carmel Church is now. When it was established not long after he settled there. And he's buried in an old family graveyard. He died, I think it was December the 28th, 1858.
What a memory. That's good.
And his son, Moses Stone, was my great-grandfather, and he is married to Selina Ann Thompson, and she is a daughter of John and Rebecca Davis Thompson of Ripley, Lauderdale County, Tennessee, and her parents gave her a few slaves as a wedding present. And after the war was over, my grandmother said that the mother of those slaves worked for some man in Tennessee long enough to pay for him to come to Marshall County, Kentucky, and bring her children back home, and they cried and didn't want to go, and her mother told them to go home to their mother.
Yes. That's really an interesting story.
And one of those slaves of John Stone's I can remember, and he's mentioned in John Stone's will. His name was Tom Stone. He lived in Birmingham when I was a small boy, and his mother was Harriet Stone, and after she is freed, she is working for Uncle Mary in Holland, burning brush in the new ground. Her clothes caught afire, and she burned to death.
Are you related to any of the modern-day Hollands like Woodrow?
Yeah, Woodrow was my third cousin. You know Elizabeth Holland Heath?
Yes.
Well, anyway, Malcolm Heath. Elizabeth's my third cousin, and Malcolm's my first cousin.
Yes, sir. Well, you've established. You were related then to Bernard Holland, recently
Yeah,
deceased.
well, yeah, his grandfather and mine. His grandfather was Lucas, and my grandfather was Valentine. They called him Vol, as half-brothers. Uncle Marion, Woodrow's grandfather, and my grandfather were own brothers.
All right, you started out and you've told us now all about your great-grandfather and so on. What about some nearer relatives?
Well, I can get closer to that, but I think I ought to tell something about the Hollands first.
All right, you go right
And
ahead.
I've got something to tell you about You may be acquainted with him. I've forgotten the name. But his professor history came from Georgia about a year ago, and some of his students dug up Lynn Boyd. And not long ago, Lynn Boyd's home, and I think it's on Kentucky Avenue in Paducah, but it's been wrecked now. And he wanted to know how the settlers of Callaway and Trade County got there. He said they couldn't come by river because they couldn't get by Muscle Shoals. Well, he didn't know much about the settlement of Nashville, which of course is in Tennessee, but they traveled through Kentucky, all except the ones that came with James Robertson and established a settlement, and then John Donaldson came with a bunch of men and the women and children by a flatboat. I don't know how they got around Muscle Shoals, but they did. They floated down the Tennessee to the Ohio, pulled up the Ohio to the Cumberland, and pulled up the Cumberland to Nashville. And it was called Nashboro then.
Yes, sir, and they still have, of course, a reproduction of that old fort, Fort Nashboro, on the Cumberland River front there.
They do.
Colonel, it's quite an interesting place, and
I know there's a lot of history behind it.
Real well. Colonel Donaldson, of course, was the father of a lady
Rachel,
that became Andrew Jackson's wife.
Anyway, John Holland came to Marshall County in 1820, and Mount Carmel Church and Cemetery is on the land he settled on. I don't know anything about where his first child was born, because he was born in 1820, and James Holland, that's the oldest one. He had fathered 10 children, 6 by his first wife, Catherine Parent, and 4 by his last wife, Christine Hill. Catherine Parent died in 1835, and he married Christine Hill in 1836. And my grandfather, V.F., was the oldest born of the Holland Hill children. And anyway, at the time he bought this land, probably for about $2.50 to $3 an acre. It was in Cowell County, and so was the Stone land. And in 1821, Hickman County was created, which included all the purchase. 1822, Callaway was established, which included both what is Callaway and Marshall now. Well, the 10 Holland children outside of James and Marion were born in Callaway County, and Uncle Marion, the youngest one, was born in 1844, and he is born in the same house that the other 8 were, that is born there in that home place. I don't know where James is born. I will repeat that. Mm-hmm. And they are all born in Callaway County except Uncle Marion. He is born in Marshall. He was born in 1844.
2 years after the county had begun.
Yeah, that's right.
Uh-huh. Well, that is a beautiful way of putting all those things. You've done an exceptionally good job there. Anything further you'd like to say about...
Well, anyway, I was born on my grandfather, William Malcolm's farm, part of his farm. And he had a half section of land, and Malcolm Creek run through the farm, and it took its name from his name.
Yes, sir.
And up above, well, this Stone home place, the little creek run through that too, but it is higher up, and then there was another Stone place, the Thompson Stone place, brother of Moses Stone, and he is a Mexican war veteran. And at that time they vaccinated for smallpox with a piece of skin. Well, he brought a piece of that back from the Mexican War, and the older child, a girl, vaccinated my grandmother, and this would-be doctor, she vaccinated her younger sister of hers. In that method, they made two little slits and then slipped the knife under that middle portion between the slits and slipped this piece in there. And by the way, that took.
Well, the way you've described it, I've always feared hypodermic needles, but I believe I'd rather go the needle route.
I think so too. That'd be kind of painful. And of course, they didn't. She didn't sterilize that knife, of course.
No, probably didn't.
Didn't know.
Didn't
They
know.
didn't know a lot of things. They didn't know about typhoid.
Sure.
I remember a Wright family over there out of Gilbertsville. You know of Dr. Carter, don't you?
I've heard.
Maybe you knew Lionel. He went to school to Murray. Well, anyway, it don't make any difference. Mm-hmm. But anyway, there's a Wright family out there. There's one of the sons came back from Arkansas, and he took typhoid. He had got contaminated in Arkansas. And by the way, the sister had it. And then, well, I believe two sisters had it after him, and they recovered. Then a younger brother had it, and he died. And Dr. Carter tried to get him to be inoculated all that time, and they are superstitious. But after this Frank Wright died, that younger son, by then they got inoculated. There's a lot of use then.
Certainly. Where did you go to elementary school?
Went to, you know where Moore's Camp is?
Yes, sir.
Anyway, that's in the same old district school I went to school in, Ball Knob.
You remember any of your teachers?
Well, sure. You probably knew Addie Fawn well.
Oh, of course.
Well, Ida Heath, Travis, Thelma's first teacher, and her aunt. Well, I first went to school with her, and then to William Gideon, who afterwards became the cashier of the Gilbertsville Bank, and then to Charlene Smith, and she married a Langston and died in Murray. Maybe you knew of her.
I knew her well.
She is a Smith before she is married.
Yes, sir.
And anyway, she taught 19 and 10. And then the next one was Isla Colley, and she is a local girl. The next one was Addie Fawn, and I'm sure you knew her.
Oh, I knew her at Benton well.
Yeah. And the next one was J.D. Cross, and he is one of these people that he didn't spare the rod.
Did he ever lay the rod on you?
Well, he sure did.
People often say to me I never had a whipping, but I can't say that personally. I had several of them.
But he had a rule I didn't appreciate. He wouldn't let anyone leave the room between recesses. And kids eating every old hard apple and wild grapes and everything else.
Yes, we sometimes needed to go that
Yeah, you had a misfortune.
His reference to Thelma, I will further explain for the radio audience, is Thelma Marshall, who came along with and showed me the way over here. All right, you've gotten us up into grade school. Did you attend high school?
Yeah, over at Benton.
Went to Benton. Tell us some of your teachers and classmates there.
Well, Mr. O.L., I believe O.L. Mulligan was an agricultural teacher, and Clyde Fieldbeck taught, and Mrs. Oney Beth fed, and uh, J. J.R. Riley, his wife, taught. He is a Baptist minister, and
Well, that's great. You've remembered your teachers. What about some of the other people? Just a scattering of names that you might think
well,
of.
August Hayden, Frank Hayden, uh, Scott Ely, Mary Ann Jones, who became Mrs. Scott Ely, and Martha Nell Holland, married Brian Holland, and she is, after Brian's death, she is circuit court clerk a while.
Did you know Ezra Blumenberg?
Well, sure, don't you remember I mentioned it a while ago? And let me see now.
I don't know if Gip Watkins would have been in there about that time.
No, he is. He got to be postmaster after Roosevelt. No, assistant postmaster under Blint Cox after Roosevelt was elected.
Yes, sir.
And well, they was in the grade school and high school is all together in the same building.
Mm-hmm.
Is that old building? It's three
Yes, sir.
stories high.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ben Thomas Cooper was in school in the grades, and Brandon Price, it's now circuit
Judge in Paducah.
Yeah,
Yes.
circuit judge in Paducah, and his father moved to Paducah after he was elected circuit judge, and there was Joe P. Ely and Jim Ed Cross.
Well, that's probably enough. You've remembered more than really I ever expected you to. Did you have any education beyond high school?
Well, yeah, I went to university. I don't know what a credit it'd be, hours it'd be now, but when I quit, I had 92 hours of college credit.
Well, you were a senior. You were.
No, I was in the law school,
Oh, I see. Uh-huh.
but most of my credits was preparatory law.
Yes, sir. Uh-huh. Well, that may have changed a little bit now. Today, if you have 90 semester hours, you're a senior.
Yeah.
And you graduate with.
Yeah, I
usually
think it's about
120.
115 hours for a Bachelor of Arts degree then.
Tell us anything you want to about amusing incidents when you grew up. Your courtship, customs.
Well, courtship, I didn't have much courtship. I never had any dates, scarcely, except one girl. I married her. And,
But that worked out well.
Yeah, she was a sister to Mrs. Marshall's husband, Helen Mary Marshall. And her her grandfather, Thomas S. Marshall, was one of John Hunt Morgan's raiders.
Oh, yes.
But he came to Marshall County after the Civil War was over.
A different marshal, I suppose, but there was a vice president who said what this country needs is a good 5-cent cigar.
Thomas R. Marshall.
Yes, sir. Oh, these marshals are wonderful people. They named the county after the great Chief Justice John Marshall.
Yeah. Well, Ben Houston was another one of Morgan's raiders, and he came from Muhlenberg County to Gilbertsville. And he is in business there a long time.
Speaking of raiders, I'd like to learn a little bit more, if you know anything, about that period of history referred to as the Black Patch War. I noticed.
Well, I'm getting into that when we go to Birmingham.
All right.
That's one of my main features.
Well, go right ahead. Anyway,
I want to tell a little more about some schools in Marshall County.
Surely.
Well, anyway, my grandmother, Ellen Victoria Stone Malcolm, my maternal grandmother, The first old school she told me she went to was an old log building, and maybe you've seen old smokehouses that was floored and had a place in the middle where they built a fire and smoked the meat.
Seen hundreds of them.
Well, anyway, that's the way this old school was. An old puncheon floor, an old puncheon seat, and they had a hole up in the roof for the smoke to go through. And she said on windy days that the smoke would smother them to death nearly.
Yes.
And the next one she went to had an old stick and dirt chimney. Stick and clay was what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Now over in this county, there's a lot of sandstone and limestone over here. They built those old early log cabins with chimneys out of sandstone or limestone. But over there they didn't have any rock, so they built them out of sticks and clay.
Yes, sir.
And
You had to use available materials.
Yeah.
Of course.
and anyway, I've got a little more to tell about that kind of a cabin when we get to Birmingham. But I want to talk a little bit about an author. I won't call any name. Anyway, he's already written one book, and he is planning on another one for the Night Riders. And the first one I bought, and it's sketches of different characters around here in this locality. And one of the first mistakes he made, he said that A.O. Stanley represented the first district, congressional district in Congress. Well, Stanley never represented the first district in Congress. He lived in Henderson, and he represented the second. At that time, Kentucky had 11 congressional districts. Well, at the time Stanley was in Congress, the first district was represented by Ollie James up at Marion, and when James was elected to the Senate, well, then Barkley was elected to succeed James. And
Campaign of 1912.
yeah, that's right. And I'll say a little more about Barkley. This happened in Lexington. Maybe you weren't old enough to remember, but you know, I know you know that Barkley run for governor in the Democratic primary in 1923 for governor.
Yes, sir. The only big race he lost.
Yeah, he was defeated by J. Samuel Cantrell, and Cantrell died before the November election. The Democratic State Central and Executive Committee picked Bill Fields as their nominee. Well, in 1926, Barkley ran for the Senate and got the nomination without any opposition. And there's an old lady where I fired a furnace. This eating place was Transylvania Inn. And before she fired me, and what she fired me for, I went off to carry papers, and I forgot and left the water running into the furnace. It's a hot water furnace, and they said he was running out the faucets up on the third floor. So she fired me. But when she was still in a good humor with me, she says, the racehorse man, it says Barkley will get beat. Says the racehorse man won't vote for him. She says he's against the pari-mutuel machine. I said, you're wrong there. I says the racehorse man will support Barkley to keep him out of state politics. And that's what happened too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A very prescient observation.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, good. Now, do you want to talk about Birmingham?
Well, I'll get to that a little more about this other book. Anyway, he said that you've heard of the Fowler Steamboat Line.
Oh, I certainly have.
The Dick and Joe Fowler. Well, old Judge Wiley Fowler was their father, and he defended this James Ford that operated that ferry up here at
Satan's Ferryman.
Yeah, that's right. and he knew a lot of things about those outlaws, but he destroyed his records. And someone asked him why. He says, well, it ruined the careers of a lot of good men. Well, this author said that the night Judge Fowler died in a cold December night, 1880, that a flock of wild geese flew over Paducah, and Judge Fowler's wife went with them. And I said that I wondered if this man had an ancestor that is at Death Watch, or else maybe he interviewed that lead gander of that flock of Canadian honkers. And he also said in there that Matthew Lyon married Mary Hertford, a niece of Ethan Adding. I won't dispute that, because maybe he did before he married the Chittenden girl. But all I ever read about his marriages was that he married the daughter of Governor Thomas Chittenden of Vermont, and hence the name of his son Chittenden Lyon, for whom Lyon County was named for. And he came to Eddyville with two of his son-in-laws, Gideon Cobb, and I don't remember the name of the other son-in-law, because since I've been crippled, I haven't very had a good chance to check. But anyway, the Gideon Cobb was the ancestor of Irving S. Cobb.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, we'll get to the Night Rider, the Birmingham episode, and a little bit about the Mormon Church. Anyway, outside of the niggers, I never heard of any movement of the local population trying to disturb a sect or a group of race, except this. Anyway, there was an old one-room school district, Davis Chapel, not far from Hamlet Church, and Hamlet Church was in existence then. And anyway, the Mormons were holding a open air meeting, and I have part of this evidence from Waddy Stringer, and he died in Birmingham. He said he didn't have anything to do with it, but he knew a lot of boys that did. And Amos Nanny, that married my double cousin, Bernie Holland, and they both long been dead. Anyway, he was talking about it too, and my maternal grandmother, asked him, where were you, Amos? And I don't think he answered. But anyway, they fired a few shots over the crowd of the audience, and they said the preacher jumped behind a tree. But anyway, we'll get to Birmingham, and I told you I had another tale to tell you about the stick and dirt chimney, and my father remembered this well. Anyway, the niggers were a bunch of niggers. They was probably shooting craps on a penny game in some little log cabin on the outskirts of Birmingham, and Simon Oden stabbed George Egner and killed him. And my father said old George Whitfield jumped into the fireplace and climbed out through that stick and dirt chimney and jumped to the ground. It probably wasn't more than about 10-foot drop, but anyway, he made plenty of space behind him. and they sent Simon Oden to prison for 2 years, and about that same time, and I can't remember whether it was Fred Stone or Fred Stone or Well, I'll skip the first name right now. I can't think of it. But he is a Stone too. Anyway, one of the other almost stole his side of meat from Zeke Holland, and they gave him 2 years too. And back before the Civil War in 1858, they hanged a nigger, Achilles. What do you call the name of that college up there? College in Tennessee that don't have that is established because of the monkey trial, that they weren't going to have any evolution. His name for the governor of Tennessee. PEA, is that the
Austin P.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's Achilles Pay
Mm-hmm.
stabbed Jake Palmer, 1858, and they hanged him. And it looked like that.
We have used up our 30 minutes, and if you need to stop the broadcast now, you may do so. Now I'm going to say that we're going to go ahead and record the rest of the tape for possible further use. Mr. Holland, we have 15 more minutes on the tape, and we'd like to hear any stories you want to give us.
Okay. We'll go to Birmingham now. Anyway, when I first remember Birmingham, it's kind of a dirty, filthy place, a lot of old sloughs around on it. That in the warm weather, it had a lot of green scum on it, and the boys skated on those ponds in the winter time. And the first settlers there were the Love and Locker families, and the Lockheads, and Laban Locker became the first postmaster in Birmingham, and Max Locker, a grandnephew of his, was the last one. And anyway, the next is a good market too for cross ties for railroads. And anyway, the old George Martin tobacco factory was there, and it was moved. Part of it was moved from Birmingham to Paducah, and it was rebuilt there close to the old NC and Sadale Railroad station where the tracks crossed 6th Street.
I remember it.
Yeah, it burned down several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't sell their tobacco to the Tobacco Trust. They prized it and put it in hogsheads there, and they shipped to New Orleans by riverboat and transferred there to ocean liners and shipped to Liverpool, England.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, when the night riders started their violence, why the first nigger they whipped it took place along the last of March. The first nigger they whipped was Steve Whitfield, and he lived on the farm where Marvin Holland later reared his family. And the house burned down that Steve lived in, and Marvin later built a house there, and the hill that's built on was known as Darty Hill. And there's a man by the name of Darty that was killed there years ago, and he was killed by his brother-in-laws. And one of them was Will Rob Smith. Darty had killed his father-in-law in Callaway County, and his brother-in-laws followed him, and Darty had come to Birmingham, and he had an old violin with him. And anyway, he started back home, they supposed, to give himself up, and he met these brothers-in-law there at Darty Hill, and they killed him. And anyway, my father said that he guessed Uncle Marion Holland had that old violin for a long time. Anyway, there's another incident happened before this nigger uprising. There's an old nigger by the name of Joe Ballard that had tried to choke a young woman to death. He'd worked for this young woman's father on the farm, and he hid in the bedroom. When she came in the bedroom, he was about to strangle her to death. And anyway, the family chased him off, and anyway, he got a prison sentence out of it, and he lost his mind, and he came back home, and he came to my paternal grandfather's home, and the family run off, and he picked up an old hatchet in the yard, they said, when the dog run out, and when the family returned, they found he had taken some meal, maybe to cook, and I think took a little fry pan, and the people in the neighborhood gathered in, and he kept telling them that wouldn't snap. He had the hatchet, and they got some clubs and beat him into submission, and I reckon they sent him to the asylum. But anyway, as I said before, Steve was the first person they whipped, and they said they tied him down over a stump, and they looked like they took some hickory switches that is about 4 feet long and just wore them off to a frazzle on that poor fella, and he had almost died. And then when they whipped the niggers in Birmingham, they whipped Lee Baker, but that is after he had already shot Otis Blake, who was a night rider. And there's another man, Mrs. Addie Chestnut told me this, that died just outside of Gilbertsville from a wound he had gotten there at Birmingham. And I reckon he was afraid to have a doctor. And anyway, he just lay there without any medical attention and died. And Lee Baker, no doubt, was the one that shot him. And there was a nigger Scruggs boy. His father, John Scruggs, went down on the porch to talk to him, and this old boy run out behind him with a .22 rifle and fired through the crowd, and the fellow told me that he says that bullet went within 6 inches of my head. And anyway, I don't think he did any damage. And and then they returned the fire and shot the old man, and he died. And they also killed a nigger infant. And anyway, Dr. Bob Overby treated these niggers that were whipped and shot, and he, not long after that, he left Birmingham. He was sort of afraid of the night riders, and they took one white man down there, and they whipped a lot of the Scruggs nigger girls. The white man they carried down there, they thought he was going to whip him. He thought they was going to whip him was Arthur Griffin, and he just had to sit there and listen to it, and see what was done, expecting to get it himself, but he didn't. And anyway, after it's over with, why, they begin to have some of them over to Benton before the grand jury, and I saw them one time coming from Benton going on their way to Birmingham. It looked like a funeral procession, and George Holland Sr. told my grandmother that he looked over the ground on the river bank where they'd whipped these niggers, and he said the whole vicinity is just covered with empty, cheap whiskey bottles. So they'd gotten liquored up to have the nerve to do it, I reckon.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, there's a fellow by the name of Bill Buck Baker that couldn't hear. And my father witnessed this, and he was in Birmingham one Saturday, and Bill Buck was there, and a fellow by the name of Claude Jones was there. And Claude was in it. And Bill Buck walked up to Claude, and there's a bunch of little bunch of men talking. He says, Claude, says, you sure did whip them nigger gals. He says, I'd have been with you if it hadn't been for Sissy and Eddie. Sis, I don't know what her name was, or she was Inman before she was married. I mean, I don't know what her first name was, but they called her Sissy. And Ed was a paralyzed son. And Claude said, kind of whispered, hush, damn it, Bill, hush. And Bill just kept on talking. And Claude went to another little group of men, and Bill Buck followed him. Claude just finally left town.
Yes, sir.
And there's two men after he's all over with, run for public office, county office, one for jailer and one for assessor, and they hope to have the Night Riders support, but they both lost. And the late Chester Beggs told me that his father was in it and a neighbor was in it, and that the neighbor, he hung around Benton a lot, and Beggs' father didn't. And this neighbor came to Beggs' father and said, the authorities over at Benton, for a certain amount of money, will forget we was in it. And Mr. Beggs just paid him off, and I guess it was for both of them.
Yes, sir.
And they said that the Commonwealth's attorney, John G. Levitt, and of course you knew Elizabeth, that is her father,
Yes, sir.
he slept in Paducah overnight.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I knew Elizabeth. Was she the one that married Preston Ordway?
Yeah, and she is 5 years older than he was.
Uh-huh. Yes, sir. Well, I take it, though, that after a time, the public generally tired of that kind of sort of taking the law into their own hands. And as you say, these people who ran expecting all the support were defeated. So,
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, is there a little more time?
yes, sir, there's about 3 or 4 more minutes.
Well, anyway, the real late night riders were, anyway, they was doing violence at the same time. You remember they hanged a man down there.
Yes, sir.
And anyway, up about Hopkinsville, the Kentucky Night Riders were going to cross the border and whipping men in Tennessee.
They took over the city one time.
Yeah. Well, there was a bunch of niggers that could, a family of niggers that could identify some of them night riders in Obion County, and they moved over to Fulton County in Kentucky, and the night riders crossed over the border and killed some of that family. And there's one little nigger girl managed to escape, and anyway, I think she afterward testified when they tried them. But Malcolm Patterson was the governor of Tennessee, and Augustus C. Wilson, governor of Kentucky, and they had a spat over it.
Yes, sir. At one time, I believe Governor Wilson, was he the one that sent troops to Murray?
Yeah, and he sent some to Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
And their purpose was to guard this Otis Blick. See, after he is wounded, he couldn't have died. He turned state's evidence,
Mm-hmm.
and they sent them there to protect him. And they sent 2 men to prison, old Dr. Champion of Lyon County and John Jackson, the town marshal of Birmingham. They sent them to prison, and they tried 2 men for whipping Steve Whitfield, not Clovis Childs, his brother Tom Childs, and Marvin Farley for whipping Steve, but they didn't convict him.
Well, we certainly thank you. Our time, I think, is about gone. This is Ray Mofield. We've enjoyed visiting in the home with Mr. Otho Holland, former resident of Marshall County, now in Livingston, and he's given us a view of history more detailed from the early days of his ancestors clear on up through the Knight Rider period, and we appreciate your cooperation very much. It's nice to see you.
Is there another minute?
Well, go ahead till it stops.
Anyway, I want to offer this for a fly leaf on your book if you publish it. And Bill Sanders had it on a plaque down there under his picture, and that last rest home they built named it in his honor.
Yes, sir.